So what is today's work? Well, you need to read chapters 10 through 12 and do the guided notes. I would start, if you haven't, jotting down facts about the following characters on your character keeper sheet. So I'm going to actually post this PowerPoint with your video today so that you can see this list. Edmund, Louis Dantes, that's his father, Danglars, Carosse, Fernand, Villefort, Captain Leclerc, Mercedes, and Morel. So go ahead and start jotting down some things you already know about them. Obviously, that's not for a grade right now. I'll take up your character keeper sheet at the end of reading the book. But if you go ahead and write those things down now, that'll help your mind as you're reading the book. And I'm going to go over that tomorrow in the video. Preview the discussion board for Count of Monte Cristo intro and for enemies. It's not due until Friday, but you can start it early if you have time. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you a heads up there. Okay. With discussion boards, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that discussion post. You would read the etiquette info attached to the post. That's really going to help us have better conversations. Here's some quick tips that I've got for you. Use complete sentences and good grammar. That way we just actually have a full thought. Answer all parts of the post. Stay on topic. And be respectful of others. So before you post something, obviously think, is this something that would be okay for me to say out loud in the classroom or in front of my parents? Or, just remember, just because it's online, yes, people are still reading it. Okay. Respond in a way that furthers the conversation. I'm going to give you a way to do that. So if you just say, I like this, or this is awesome, or okay, or something like that, that's not really helpful. So I'm going to show you a little bit of ways to do that. So here's how to build off of the conversation. Instead of saying just I agree, or I disagree, or I like, say things like, I like what you said about, fill in the blank with what the person said, which also makes me think, and then you could piggyback off their comment. Going off what you said about, mention what they said, and then give your own thoughts. You said blank very well. What do you think about this other thing that you noticed? I agree, but I also think, or I'm not sure about that. So you can disagree. That's totally fine. Just say it nicely and then give your reason why. Okay. Now, tip for the day is this. You could create a family mailbox system, or just leave notes around your house. That would be a way to encourage people. I know I personally love getting letters, and so that could be something that you did around the house. I'm going to try to do something like that with my family. Also, there are probably people at your church or that your parents know through work who don't hear a lot from people, so you could find out ways to mail them letters. It might make their day. Give them a phone call, especially if it's like an elderly person who's really stuck at home, or you could send them a message some other way. Take breaks. You're probably going to need this a little bit more being online than you did even in the classroom. So I would make sure that I get up and move around. You had the 5 minutes to switch classes every 50 minutes. I would think for you guys, probably every 20 or 30. You need to make sure that you take a bit of a break. It's easy to feel like you got to get zoned in and do everything, but I would make sure that I'm taking breaks. Also, this is just something that I'm going to have to do and that I learned over the past few years from a friend. But apparently something in our brains, when we're looking at a screen, it does something with the melatonin in our brain. And so if you try to work until right before bed, or you're looking at a screen right before bed, it's going to take you a while for your brain to shut down and have that melatonin that you need to be able to go to sleep. So try to cut off screens at least 30 minutes before bedtime. I'm going to try to do that. I know that's hard, especially if you have multiple people in your family, you're sharing devices, you have different things to do. So it's not going to be something you can do all the time, but if you can, I think that would maybe help people to sleep better. It's just a thought that I had and wanted to share with you. Okay, so Count of Monte Cristo. Let's go ahead and look at today's questions. Wrong one. Let's go back right here. Okay, so in chapter 7, we have a scene with the actual king of France. Remember, Napoleon is still on the island of Elba, and you've got your royalists and your Bonapartists. So King Louis the 18th is the king at the time, And there is a message that Villefort delivers to the king, and he's telling him, hey, listen, King Louis, there's a conspiracy brewing in Marseille, and Edmond Dantes has been imprisoned, and this is why. Okay, he's part of the conspiracy. So the news that the king receives at that same time is that Napoleon has escaped the Isle of Elba and is marching towards Paris. Okay, so not a good time for Dantes to be imprisoned because they're going to feel more of a threat, and also it's going to be really easy to be, hate to say it, forgotten. Okay, so in chapter 8. What happens in the conflict between Napoleon and King Louis XVIII? So again, we've got some historical context here. Napoleon defeats the king, but then he only rules for 100 days, and then the king returns to power. So it's very short-lived, and you can guess that things are not looking very good for the Bonapartists or the people who have been accused of being a Bonapartist. So when the king's restored, Villefort goes ahead and marries Renee, the lady that he was planning on marrying earlier, and he gains a lot of power and wealth. So he still gets to do what he wants. Edmond Dantes is still stuck in prison. Kind of reminded of Joseph, you know, when he was in prison, and then he talks to the cupbearer and the baker, and they, you know, have their dreams interpreted, and the one guy's restored back to the king, and Joseph's like, don't forget me. And then he does. So yes, Dantes is very much forgotten during this time. Now, what's happened to Danglars? So we're getting a what's happened to everybody update during this time. So Danglars, that was the jealous shipmate of Edmond. He ended up leading out of fear of Edmond's return, because he's like, oh, well, if Napoleon takes over, then Edmond's going to get out of jail. And so he left because he was fearful of what would happen to him. And he becomes a Spanish merchant. Fernand, the guy that loved Mercedes, he ends up actually joining the army under the emperor. Okay, so fighting with Napoleon. And what happens with Mercedes? So Edmond Dantes' girl, she mourns Edmond, so that's nice, but she grew in her affection and gratitude toward Fernand. So a part of the plot, you know, when they got rid of Edmond, was for Fernand to be able to swoop in and comfort Mercedes and be able to have her for his own, and it works. Edmond's father sadly passes away. He was already really sick and poor and starving, and so he only lasts about 5 months after Edmond's imprisonment. Completely breaks his heart. So in chapter 9, there's some stages of misery for a prisoner that are given on page 41 through 42, and you'll see those outlined here. They go through pride and thinking, you know, that they're going to be able to get out. Then they go through doubt. They pray to men, so they're begging them for things. We saw a little bit of that in the reading that I read yesterday. They pray to God, and then they start to despond, to become depressed. They become angry, and then they eventually become suicidal. And we see Edmond go through this during this time. He makes a plan to kill himself through starvation. So he starts throwing all of his food away because he believes that hanging himself would be dishonorable. So he takes the long go of it to keep his honor. Now, he's saved from this. This is a redemptive story, not one that's broken. And so something prevents him from committing suicide, and that is that he hears a noise through the prison wall. He's like, oh, I am not completely alone, because he's been in isolation. It messes with your mind. But then he hears a noise, and he's like, oh, there's somebody else. There's a bit of hope with that possible human contact. So he then starts to dig to see if he can make connection with this other prisoner. And what he does is he uses a broken piece from his pitcher and then the handle of a saucepan. So the things that they bring him to eat with, he is able to break some of those pieces and hide them and use them to dig and to be able to try to make contact with this other prisoner. He has at this point been in prison for 7 years. Okay. Some of you guys are not quite 14 yet, so that's half your life. Angus just turned 7. That's his entire life. That's a lot of time to lose with people. I think a lot of us would go stir crazy after just a few days or months, and he's been there for 7 long years. Okay, and we will pick up on chapter 10 tomorrow. So I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. Again, let me know if you need anything through the email, through the chat, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.